to kick us off with the Congress, let me introduce our keynote speaker for today. Our keynote speaker is the Assistant Dean for Partnerships at the Office of Education Research and the Senior Education Research Scientist at the Science of Learning and in Education Center, National Institute of Education at the Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. Her main research interests are in the areas of resilience, mindsets, well-being, metacognition, and social networks. She has led several interventions and large-scale longitudinal studies examining how students can be better supported to become adaptive, strategic, and flourishing learners. Her research was published in many peer-reviewed and high-ranking journals, including Teaching and Teacher Education, Educational Psychology, Child Indicators, Journal of Research in Science Teaching, Applied Cognitive Psychology, and Journal of Early Adolescence. She is a recipient of the National Institute of Education Excellence in Research Award for 2021. Our keynote speaker is one of the editors for two Springer books about the well-being of children and adolescents. First book titled Positive Education in Asia, and the other one, Positive Psychology and Positive Education in Asia, Understanding and Fostering Well-being in Schools. She is also an editorial board member of the journal Educational and Developmental Psychologist. And she is also a founding member of the Singapore Positive Education Network. Without further ado, let us all welcome our keynote speaker, Dr. Imelda Santos Calion. Hello, Dr. Imelda. Good morning.
Good morning, Junix. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes po.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me. Deeply appreciate the trust and also the recognition of what I have been doing so far over here in Singapore. Okay, so maybe I'll share my screen and let's see. Okay, so I cannot see the share screen. Okay. So are you all able to see my screen?
Yes po.
Okay. Okay, so again, a pleasant morning to everyone. So I don't want this to be a monologue, but instead a dialogue, which is something that I'm going to emphasize later on. So if ever there's anybody who would like to speak up or respond to my questions, I would really appreciate it. Okay, so for today, I will be talking about this topic, empowering educators and how to harness positive psychology for transformative teaching in the Philippines. Okay, so, but what I'm going to share is not just applicable to the Philippines, but also around the world. Okay, so I think you could relate to the central figure that I'm showing to you now. So we know that teaching is one of the most noble professions in the world. However, it's also the most stressful. Okay, and teacher well-being, concerns about teacher well-being has been raised globally. Why? So teacher well-being is important not just for the teachers, but it's also very important for the students. There is a substantial body of literature suggesting that the well-being of teachers and students are very much related. So just like what the first article over in the upper right-hand corner shows, happy teachers make happy students. And then what would happen if the teachers are not happy? So a lot of problems would occur. So it is very important to emphasize the well-being of teachers if we want our students to have higher levels of well-being. Okay, so this will be the outline of my presentation for today. First, I will share with you what well-being is from my perspective, okay, because there are many definitions of well-being, but I will share with you something that is, in my perspective, is comprehensive approach in looking at well-being. Then I will be sharing something about the meaning of positive psychology. So there is a change or shift in the way positive psychology is being conceptualized, and I'll be sharing with you a bit about that. Then I will be sharing with you how teachers as well as students can be empowered to improve their well-being. So just to to embody the title of my presentation. Okay, let's start with this. Okay, the first question, what is well-being? So in conceptualizing well-being, we need to be able to answer this question. When somebody talks to you and says, "How are you? How well are you?" How would you answer that? Okay? Because that would cover the very essence of what well-being is all about. Okay. So, again, based on the conceptualization of well-being that I am trying to present here, well-being comprises two aspects. One is about feeling good. I think this is the one that we usually associate with happiness. Okay? So when you feel good, you feel happy. And the less known aspect of well-being is about functioning well. Okay? And when we are high in all of the aspects of well-being, we could say that we are having optimal functioning, having optimal experience, and we could also say that we are flourishing. But what is the meaning of feeling good? Okay, based on the literature, feeling good is about, you know, uh, having low pain, having high pleasure, feeling relaxed or happy, being away from problems, feeling satisfied with our lives. And the other aspect is about having a higher presence of positive mood and absence or lower levels of negative mood or affect. Okay. So if it's about feeling, it's about subjective well-being. The other aspect of well-being is what we call psychological well-being, which is associated with optimal functioning. I've seen that there's somebody presenting about meaning and purpose. Okay, that is a key aspect of psychological well-being. Another presentation, I think, would focus on vitality, how well-being is associated with the feelings of vitality or feeling energized in our lives. Okay, let me focus more on psychological well-being because this is the less known aspect of well-being. So according to Carol Reef, well-being has these 6 components. Okay, number 1 is about self-acceptance. Okay, that's the first thing that I'd like to focus more on. Self-acceptance is about knowing our strengths and as well as our weaknesses, and then accepting ourselves as who we are. So it starts with awareness and then accepting what we are or who we are. Okay. The other aspect is about personal growth. Well-being is associated with having that sense of continuously improving and developing as a person. Once we stop developing, once we stop learning, then our well-being can be compromised. Okay, that's why maybe those people who are retiring and not doing anything anymore, they stop learning. So they are usually reported to have experiences of or symptoms of depression. Okay. Another key component of well-being in this framework is what we call meaning in life. Okay. And then meaning is about purpose. It's about having particular goals in our life. Okay. And thinking that our life makes sense. Okay. I'll be sharing more about the key components of purpose and meaning later on. The other aspect is about environmental mastery. Okay, environmental mastery covers the idea of being able to manage your environment, being able to use the resources that are present in the environment to address your needs. Okay? It is the ability to effectively use the opportunities that are present or resources that are present in the environment. Autonomy, which is one of my favorite components of well-being, is about being able to make choices, being able to think that what is happening in your lives is basically your choice. It's not something that is imposed on you. It's about something that you are able uh, to decide on your own. Okay, so in all of these aspects of different uh, indicators of well-being, one of the most important one is positive relationships. Okay. I believe I hope you are familiar with that study, the Harvard study, which involves I think people from young, it is about 80 years of study. They followed, I don't know what was their starting point, but it is an 80-year study. And they mentioned that one of the most important determinant of happiness and long life, they highlighted the aspect of having positive and warm relationships. Okay, so with this conceptualization of well-being, I will be framing all of the different guidelines or suggestions that I will be presenting in order to help our teachers and our students to develop higher levels of well-being. Okay. So, but the next thing is I'd like to highlight, because this is one of the uh, aspects of my talk today, is about the essence of positive psychology. So basically, positive psychology, simply put, is the science of well-being. Okay? But the essence of positive psychology is about balance. Okay? So in the literature, there has been a higher emphasis before the movement of positive psychology has been conceptualized or has been pushed. There was an imbalance in the literature in relation to tackling issues in relation to mental health. Okay, so the focus was more on what goes wrong rather than what goes well. So positive psychology was born or was conceptualize in order to shift the balance so that we can have an increased focus on what goes well and learn from it. Okay? That is what we call positive psychology 1.0. As I mentioned earlier, there is a shift in focus in the positive psychology field, okay, with in relation to this. Okay, so instead of just the happy face, now there is this shift in perspective on looking at the dual nature, the totality of human experience. Okay? Others criticize positive psychology as being too positive, that it could be a curse as well, focusing so much on the positive, we could be neglecting the negative side. So in the in the spirit of balance, we are going to look at the positive as well as the negative. How can we enhance the positive and reduce the negative aspect of our experience? How can we tap on our negative experiences in order to flourish? So this is the essence of what we call positive psychology 2.0. Okay, more about balance, more about considering both the positive and negative aspects of human experience. Okay. Then now I'm moving towards the idea of empowerment. How can teachers and students be empowered to improve well-being? Okay. So I will be drawing on the theory of proposed by one of the rock stars in positive psychology, Barbara Fredrickson. So according to her, positive people are able to maintain a broader perspective and see the big picture, which helps them identify solutions whereas negative people maintain a narrower perspective and tend to focus on problems. As you could see from here, Professor Fredrickson focuses more on the positive side of human experience, right? And I'll be sharing with you later on why is that so. Okay. So based on her theory, okay, positive emotions, positive aspects of life, positive emotions allow us to have a broader perspective, allow us to have more noble thoughts, a greater variety of thoughts that allow us to develop resources in order for us to flourish, to survive, to fulfill our goals. A good example is joy. When we feel happy, we tend to explore more, okay? We tend to look at the different possibilities. When we are solving problems, we could see more possible solutions. Okay, as we explore, we have greater curiosity, we develop our resources such as creativity. And when we are more creative, we can solve more problems and deal with our lives in a more adaptive and better way. Okay, so that's the essence of the broaden and build theory. Okay. Now, the next question is, why is that so? I mean, why just focus on the positive? Earlier on, I was talking about balance, about the dialectic nature of human experience, how the positive and negative somehow operate together in our lives. Okay, so this is a question that I'd like to raise to everyone. Okay. So when you see this picture, which is the one, these three pictures, which is the one that immediately captured your attention? So I need somebody to answer. Maybe I could ask Junix.
Hello po.
Yes.
Well, I focused on um yeah, I
A, yours.
agree.
Uh,
Sorry, the first
mm-hmm.
photo because it was more vibrant in color and
Uh-huh.
there seems to be like a carefree
Okay.
um like attitude on like the woman on the photo.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Junix. Okay, let's try others. Let's try three people. Okay. So I don't know who could respond. I don't know if they are around. So anybody else who has a different perspective? How many are we here? We are 300. Wow. Okay. Anybody who chose letter B?
Um, Doc Imelda, hi.
Yes. Oh, sorry. I cannot see everybody, but who is the one talking? Can you share? Can you introduce yourself?
Pat. I'm Pat. I just want to read some of the responses of our participants in the group chat.
Oh, thank you so much. I could not see it. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of them said
Mm-hmm.
that answered A, and
Mm-hmm.
some also answered B.
Okay.
Sabi nung isa, Doc, B because there are trees around.
Oh,
Gano'n
okay.
siyang
Mm-hmm.
ano. Tapos meron
Mm-hmm.
din nagsabi B because it gives a sense of calm. Ayan.
Okay.
Walang mga
Mm.
reasons yung mga nandun sa chat, yung dalawa lang po. Pero mostly
Okay.
A and B.
Okay. Has anybody selected C?
So far po no one, Doc, but
Uh-huh.
someone has their hand raised. Teresita, would you like to
Oh,
speak?
yes. Uh-huh. Yes, Miss Teresita.
Yes, good morning. I
Good morning.
I choose B because I
Mm-hmm.
associated it with early morning and calmness.
Uh-huh. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Miss Teresita. Okay. Wow. I love this audience because according to studies, what will be selected or what would what would because they did the neural imaging of their sample of their participants and they try to look at the neural activity in the brain when they are presented by pictures like this. Of course, um, I find it difficult to get exactly the same picture. with a different context. Okay. So there is a little bias in my presentation. Okay. Now, but what I could see is that what I heard is there are more who responded A. Am I right, Junix?
Yes po, mostly A po, and a bit of
Okay,
B.
okay. Yes, thank you very much. Okay, and others selected B. Okay, what does the literature say? Okay. Oh, sorry, there is another one. Okay. So I'll share with you what the literature says. Okay, let's have another one. This one was contextualized in Japan. Let's have another set. Okay, which one immediately captures your attention? Okay, any answer? Anybody who selected A?
So far, Doc, the answers are B, mostly
Okay.
B,
Mm-hmm.
but with no reason. But if
Uh-huh.
there is anyone in the call who'd like
Mm-hmm.
to speak, you can raise your hand and unmute.
Mm-hmm. Okay, B.
So, yeah, mostly B. And somebody said B because it shows resilience. And
Wow.
it's very Pinoy, tawa lang kahit may baha. It gives off resilience vibes for letter B.
Thank you very much. Okay, so letter B. Okay, I sense that our audience have this very positive disposition. It could be reflective of what really captures your attention, and what does research say? According to this study, okay, they were shown negative, neutral, and positive images. Okay, mostly the letter A is supposed to represent uh, the the negative image. Then letter B is supposed to represent the positive image, and then the neutral one is this guy. Okay, of course, in the real experiment, I could not find the actual pictures that they use in there's supposed to be a control in the color and all right. Okay, so what they found is that the negative image is the one that arouses increase that has the highest amplitude of brain potential. So brain reaction was more on the one that is a negative image. Okay, so and in the literature it's called a negative cognitive bias. Okay, so, what does it tell us about our audience? I feel that our audience has somehow overcome the negativity bias because in both contexts or situations, you chose the positive image. Okay. Actually, this picture is highlighted in the news as showing the Filipino spirit. No, kahit baha, nakatawa pa rin, di ba? Okay, and the other one, this is actually the representative image of a tsunami, the tsunami victims that happened in Japan. Okay, she lost all of her dogs and she was really frustrated and feeling so low when after the tsunami, okay, and the earthquake. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so the reason why I'm presenting this is the reason why Barbara Fredrickson is focusing on positive emotions. Okay, because if we are naturally focusing on it, just like you, if you're naturally focusing on the positive, there's no need for the interventions. Okay, there's no need for the positive psychology intervention, and there's little need for positive psychology interventions because you are able to overcome our natural tendency, which is to look more on the negative aspects. This is part of our adaptations or evolution for us to survive. Okay. Now, so for in the literature, how do we enhance positive emotions? Somebody will be sharing this, but I just be giving you some of the key points and also related to my study. So, in order to overcome the negativity bias, which many of our students perhaps have, or many people around the world have possessed or demonstrate, so there is a need to when we have positive emotions, there's a need to prolong the experience or enhance it because we are hardwired to focus on the negative. Okay. So here are some of the savoring strategies. Like maybe you don't know that they are savoring strategies when you share your positive experiences with others, when you congratulate yourself, when you succeeded and you got your promotion, or your student who is always absent suddenly turn up in class. Okay. It's about reminiscing our positive experiences, focusing on the sensory perception, just like what this boy is doing while eating something, maybe his favorite food, like focusing on the sensations. Okay, and the last one is about practicing gratitude, which is a way to savor positive experiences. Okay. Okay, so gratitude is about, uh, in my perspective, gratitude is reflecting about the good in our lives and focusing on others, okay, who have done good for us. So having a gratitude, having a disposition of gratitude. Oh, sorry, how do you say that? Having a grateful disposition. Okay, that's a better term. Having a grateful disposition is actually associated with higher levels of well-being, higher levels of resilience, and these are some of the exercises that can be done in order to help our students to improve their gratitude levels. Number one, and the literature is very common, is about counting blessings. It's writing about what we are grateful for and why. Okay. Then the next one is something that we use in our study is about placing, gratitude on a wall. Okay, the gratitude notes on the wall in order for others to know that what others are grateful for. So there could be some kind of resonance in their thoughts and experiences. And the other approach in enhancing gratitude is by expressing gratitude. According to studies, gratitude expression has stronger effect compared to just counting blessings. Okay. So the literature says that grateful people tend to be happier, they're more satisfied with life, they also experience less stress. Another set of studies also suggests that grateful people tend to be more motivated and tend to make progress towards their goals. Okay, so doing gratitude is one step towards empowerment because we are shifting our focus towards the positive aspects of life, which is to counteract the negativity bias, which you don't have, but your students, many of your students may have. Okay. So in our own study, we also have noted that grateful people tend to be more resilient. Okay, so our study suggests that gratitude is associated with having positive relationships and also promote it also is associated with higher levels of school resilience and school well-being. Okay. Uh, the next step, okay, so following our framework, we focus more on positive emotions earlier, and somebody later on, I think, will discuss more on how to cultivate positive emotions. So there are more positive emotions. We have joy, pride, okay, forgiveness. The next step is how do we cultivate the psychological well-being? Some of the key components here are autonomy, relationships, and also competence, which is connected to associated with mastery of environment, associated with personal growth, competence. Okay, this is one of my most my favorite theories. What this is these are the two other rock stars of motivation, and which is now being used as a key theory in positive psychology. Okay, so according to these two guys, we all have our fundamental needs: so autonomy, relationships, relatedness, and competence. And once these needs are satisfied, the better they are satisfied, the more motivated we are in doing tasks that satisfy our that increase the satisfaction of our needs for competence, autonomy, and relatedness. And if these three are satisfied, we have higher levels of well-being, higher level of positive affect, sense of meaning, self-fulfillment, as well as physical health. Okay. Next question is, how do we enhance these three different aspects? How do we increase the likelihood that these three components or indicators or markers of well-being or determinants of well-being can be enhanced? Okay, so of course, if we are teachers, we need to feel competent. Okay, our environment, our training need to make us competent on the task that we do. Okay, so right now, teachers need more training on how to use AI. Okay, I'm not doing this research. So if you are interested in some tips from my co-researchers in NIE, you could scan this QR code. The other thing is the other key, another important aspect of developing competence or satisfying our competence needs, especially in relation to teaching, is providing psychological first aid to students. Because teachers nowadays, they have more roles, more multidimensional role. They are not just teachers. They could also serve, or they need to serve as counselors, de facto counselors, because they need to identify who are the ones who are suffering from depression or some who have suicidal tendencies. They need to provide psychological first aid. And these two publications tell us what are the key components of psychological first aid that our teachers can go through. But of course, the different discussions that we're going to have later on and the recommendations that I have, they could all be included in the psychological first aid kit. Okay, so in case you're interested on how psychological first aid has been conceptualized and how their effects were assessed, you could look at these two publications. Okay, in our own study in NIE, we followed adolescents from, in Singapore, it's called secondary one, and then I think it's high school. Now I'm already confused with the Philippines. You already have middle school, I think, and you also have the JC. In the Singapore, it's called JC level. I think you have the grade 11 and 12. Okay, so we followed adolescents over 4 years, identified who are the ones who develop resilience, and then observed their teachers. Okay, the teachers of classes with high levels of resilience development, and examined how the teachers were teaching. We look at the different ways the teachers of these students are teaching and how they help satisfy the needs or supported the students' needs for competence, autonomy, and relatedness. And these are some of the results of our study. What is distinctive about these teachers when it comes to supporting students' need for competence are these: offering high quality feedback, asking more higher order and open-ended questions. Okay, I won't be highlighting all, but I'd like to highlight this one. And they encourage positive self-belief and confidence. And this is very much associated with self-efficacy and also personal growth and mastery. Allows us to have a sense of mastery in the environment. If we believe that we're capable, we are directed towards that, having mastery of the environment. Okay, so an example of how to provide quality feedback is this. Okay, so the teachers are indicating specifically where students have gone wrong, what they have gone right, identify specific areas for improvement, and they also allow students to experience small successes. Okay, so the teachers like to use the term in Singapore, like to use the term bite size, bite size. They try to, for students who are not doing very well, they try to divide the task into small bites, and then with the goal of allowing the students to have developed that growth-oriented attitude to experience small successes and increase their level of self-belief. Okay, positive self-belief to be more specific. Okay, when it comes to autonomy, okay, the literature says for the leaders, okay, of schools or universities, it is important for the teachers' voices to be heard. Okay? It's also important for the purpose of changes or programs be elucidated to the teacher. So this is more for the teachers. What about for the students? Okay, how can autonomy be supported? Okay, so here are some of the ideas. Okay, sorry, I got distracted by the message on my screen. Okay, so in supporting students' autonomy, what we have seen from our classroom observation is that having students mentor their classmates, support their classmates, increases their sense of autonomy. They are also listening to their suggestions and then asking them to present on the board. Very simple uh, activities, but the students really appreciate those, that their ideas are heard, they are also being acknowledged, and whenever they are sharing ideas, they get energized. Okay? So I won't highlight all the points, but if you have further queries, I could share with you some concrete examples of this. Okay. When it comes to relatedness, I think Filipinos are very good at this, connecting with people. We are very relational by nature. I always hear that as a comment for Filipinos. We are very hospitable. Okay. We are good at connecting. Okay. But just to share with you, in case you are, because we are all evolving, right? In case you are getting so busy when it comes to teaching and professional activities, it is important. This is directed to school leaders. It is important to allocate a protected time for informal socialization activities for teachers, something like a time off. In Singapore, we have what we call white space, when the teachers are given this specific time, off time, okay? I think it's normally Fridays, 1 hour to 2 hours. They could do what they want. Okay, they would not be disturbed. They could talk to others. So they call it the white space. Okay. It's also important to establish, the second point, establish communities of practice or collaborative learning teams. So in Singapore, what they do when they do lesson plans is like, so they contribute in the lesson plan. They don't have to prepare lesson plans on their own. So they also, let's say one is more an expert on this area. So they just use that lesson plan for the teaching of that. So they share their resources. Okay. So a community of practice is important to, reduce the load. Okay. So this is for the teachers. Okay. But why is that? Why am I emphasizing that? Um, Having a common goal is important in building relationships. So that's why I'm emphasizing that here. It's one of the key recommendations when it comes to building relationships amongst teachers. Okay. When it comes to enhancing relatedness between teachers and students, our study shows that simple words, simple questions can help the teachers be in tune with the students. And then these simple words, just as simple as asking, how are you? Do you need help? These are being appreciated by the students, just like this. These are all coming from our interviews and classroom observations. So that when we ask the students, what do you remember the most about your teacher? They mention about uh, uh, no, she will come to me and ask if I need any help. Okay, they will always write things in my journal asking what happened or how are you feeling. So these simple questions make our students feel that you see them and acknowledge them, that you want to connect with them. But after asking all of these questions, there's a need to provide a sustained attention. Like, for example, if some student says, I'm not feeling well, then you need to follow that up. Okay. Or don't just say, how are you for the sake of saying, how are you? Okay. So we have more of these results, but as I said, these are just examples of what I think would be worthy of sharing when it comes to supporting relatedness. Okay, teaching students and teachers how to do active listening will also be important. Sometimes our students just need someone to listen to them. And in Singapore, we are developing what we call the peer support networks. They call it peer support leaders. So the students are taught on how to provide support to their classmates, but not psychological support, but basically just being a body in case the students need some kind of help or support, or when they want to vent. Okay, so the students are being trained to become peer supporters. Okay. So in case you have question, I could expound more on this about active listening. We're doing an intervention in relation to building relationships amongst the students. Okay, so I'm going back to the notion of gratitude, because gratitude is a very pro-social kind of emotions. Gratitude allows us to focus on others, how others have benefited us, the role of others in our lives, their actions that have supported us in some ways. So if we are more grateful, we become more conscious of the goodness of people around us. And gratitude is a social glue that can bind people together. This is something that we found also in our studies. Okay, when we do gratitude intervention, the relationships of the students, the decline in relationship of students tend to be prevented. Okay. The next part is focusing on meaning. Okay. So I think I need to move faster. Sorry, Junix, I'm supposed to end at 9:25, right? Or 9:10 to allow for questions.
Yes, but it's also okay to end at 9:15 or 9:20.
Yes.
We can have like 5 to 10 minutes for questions.
Thank you so much, Junix. Okay. So, as I said, I'm moving from the subjective well-being to psychological well-being. I covered relationships, autonomy, competence covers the mastery of environment, and also connected to acceptance. Okay, now I'm focusing on meaning and purpose. So I look at the program, somebody will cover this. I'm just giving an introduction. Okay, what is meaning? What is having a sense of meaning? And in other literature, it's called meaning and purpose. Others call it purpose. Okay, so what is the meaning of meaning in life? Okay, so based on this definition, having a sense of meaning is comprises three components. It's about making sense of our lives, having a particular goal or purpose, and believing that we matter. So based on the definitions, these are the three key aspects of meaning. Okay. Number one is a sense of coherence. It is important for us to understand what's going on in our lives, how things are connected, the different patterns. Okay. If we are not able to connect the dots, okay, using the words of Steve Jobs, if we are not able to link our experience, it will appear to us as chaotic and messy, and that is detrimental to our well-being. Our life needs to make sense. The other one is our life needs to matter. It should have some value. Okay? We need to feel that we are important in the world. If we lose that sense of significance, that is one main cause of depression, especially among the elderly, right? When they think that they don't have any more value, they're just waiting for their time, they become depressed. It is important that we feel that we are still important, that we still have a role in the world. And the other one, which is usually um, um, considered as the key aspect of meaning in life, is purpose. Having plans, having goals. And it's also connected to hope. Okay? So all of these key aspects are very important in well-being. Um, in some literature, this is even considered as the core of psychological well-being, having that sense of meaning. But why so? Why is meaning in life so important? So I'd like to cite this philosopher who said this, and I think it's very important for us teachers to know more about the why. of our life, of our being a teacher. Okay. According to Friedrich Nietzsche, if you have your why for life, you can get by with almost anyhow. Teacher's life is stressful. I think many of our lives are stressful. Most of us experience a good deal of stress, our students as well, both online and offline. But once we know the why of our life, our purpose, the meaning of our lives, we can deal with the slings and arrows of our lives. Okay, but the next question is, how do we do that? Okay, some suggestions. It's important for us to reflect and integrate our experience. Why the event now? Why is it happening? How is it connected to our previous experience? How is it connected to our goals? Okay. We engage in new, novel, challenging, and rewarding behaviors because once we get rewarded, we feel that we matter, our life is important. Okay. Revisit and question, reflect about teaching practice. Okay. Some teachers maybe are losing steam in their lives. Maybe they don't think, okay, am I really meant for this job? Okay. So maybe you could pair them together with other teachers who have very strong passion for teaching. Okay. And then the last part that I would like to, this is a classic positive psychology intervention, the best possible self intervention is about, imagining how your life will be like if your goal, your fundamental goals, the one that you like to happen the most desired goal happens. How will your experience be like? And then think about how you are going to achieve that goal. Okay, so that is part of the best possible self intervention. Okay, so these are practices that could increase our sense of meaning. Okay, then the next thing that we can ask is how can teachers and students be empowered to improve their well-being using a different approach? So far, I'm just adopting uh, more from the positive psychology literature. But I happen to do another study which focuses more on metacognition. Does metacognition have anything to do with well-being? Okay. So what I have noted from the literature is that there is very strong connections between the cognitive and the emotional, the affective aspects. And it's found in the literature that when we are more metacognitive, we could have experience more positive emotions. And uh, other literature indicate that we could have higher levels of well-being. Okay. So, but what is metacognition? So it's like having a second brain that monitors your thinking process. So not just the thinking process, but even your affective process, your emotions. So if you are able to think about your thoughts and emotions, you are and do that effectively, you are highly metacognitive, and that is important in well-being. Okay, so I don't have enough time, but these are just some of the examples of what it means to have a high level of well-being. If you're a teacher, you start with you are like this. You know well about the concepts and principles. You're aware of your weakness and strengths as a teacher. You can you know that how your students learn best and what are their weaknesses. Okay. You also know when the students seem to have a difficulty when you are teaching, okay? Or you feel very relaxed in teaching this topic. You always set goals. You prepare for the unexpected situations. These are some key markers of a highly metacognitive teacher. And these are very important for us to be effective as teachers, to be metacognitive. Okay? And then when we are more metacognitive, we are able to monitor our teaching process and also regulate, make adjustments if needed. How can metacognitive competence be enhanced in a way that we could also enhance our well-being as well as teaching effectiveness? Remember, competence, personal growth, mastery of environment, knowing your resources. These are all key aspects of well-being, especially psychological well-being. How can metacognitive competence be enhanced? One way is to do self-questioning. The literature is replete with lots of tips. And when I summarize it, the strongest, the most powerful are those that involve prompts. Self-questioning, just like this that are shown in the screen. You ask yourself questions. For example, what can you do differently? What do you know about the topic? What else do you need to know? Okay, what have you been doing that is helping you accomplish your goal? These are some of the self-questioning prompts that can allow you to become more metacognitive as a teacher. And then we have this what we call strategic mindset. So a strategic mindset is also another key component which allows us to be more empowered as a teacher, be more empowered to improve our skills as a teacher, and to be more metacognitive. And this literature tells us that basically we just need to ask a few questions to develop this strategic mindset. For example, what can I do to help myself? Is there a way to do this even better? How else can you do this? These are powerful self-questioning prompts to develop a strategic mindset. And according to the literature, if you develop a strategic mindset, even the students, I think the study has been done with university students, they become more metacognitive, they utilize more metacognitive strategies, they become more successful in their goals, including health goals, okay? And then another key aspect here. So it's important for us to reflect on our experiences, and reflective writing is very important, okay? So when we make sense of challenging events and understand the connections between our experiences and our values, we are able to develop greater competence. We are able to learn from our experiences. And this one is an example of how reflection can be done, how you could benefit from your experiences as teachers, and allows you to also plan for the next situations in your classroom, okay? How can you improve for the next lessons, okay? You could do this as a guide in your reflections. Okay, another tip when it comes to reflection is by doing expressive writing. Okay, many of you, I think the guidance counselors here are familiar with the work of Penny Baker. According to Penny Baker, he mentioned that once we write about our emotions, we are able to process them more. It helps regulate our emotions. When we use these prompts and we focus more on the positive, first we process our experience and then shift to the positive, it can positively influence our well-being and also influence our future outcomes. Okay, so this is one powerful prompt that has been reported to be effective when it comes to enhancing well-being and regulating emotions, especially negative emotions. Okay, so another key strategy when it comes to regulating emotions and when it comes to monitoring, evaluating, and modifying emotional reactions, which is a definition of emotional regulation, is self-talk. Okay. This one was drawn from the work of Vygotsky. You know, when you see our children, they tend to talk to themselves, right? But actually, is their way of learning how to communicate. It's their way of navigating the social world. Then afterwards, okay, this is what we call private talk, okay, the work of Vygotsky, it becomes internalized, okay, and it's called inner speech. This is the origin, one of the foundations of the metacognitive theory literature, okay. Then, in the literature right now, brain studies suggest that when we do our self-talk, when we talk to ourselves, especially when we frame it in a dialogic way, okay, it is more effective in regulating emotions. Brain research also says that when we talk to ourselves in the third person, okay, it's also more effective and does not make it more taxing for our brain. Okay, so third person self-talk can reduce negative emotions, can regulate our emotions, negative emotions in particular. Okay, it's like you are talking to another person. So we are able to do psychological distancing, and we are able to process more of our emotions and our experiences when we talk to ourselves in the third person. Okay, so after presenting all of this to you, like, so we started up with subjective well-being and then psychological well-being, some tips from the positive psychology literature, as well as the metacognitive theory or metacognition theory. I also drew on self-determination theory. One thing that stands out for me as a key aspect of empowering both teachers and students is the idea of reflection. Okay. There are many other components in the tips or recommendations that I've given in order to nurture or promote or boost levels of well-being of students and teachers. But reflection has been a key aspect of many of them. So why Socrates? So according to him, the unexamined life is not worth living. When we are not able to reflect on our lives, on our experiences, we don't think about the past, the present, and the future. We just live. We just go with the flow. But we don't have that, we are not able to optimize our experience. We don't learn from our experiences. We don't consolidate our experiences in such a way that it aligns with our purpose. We are just like floating in water without any direction. Okay, so that's one thing that I'd like to emphasize. Please do reflection. When you reflect, you also empower yourselves to improve your well-being, and you may also train your students to do the same. Okay? And when we do our reflections, we take note of the positives, positive experiences. We also take note of our negative experiences and see what we could learn from them. How can we harness our negative emotions in such a way that we are able to improve, we are able to increase our resilience, we are able to maximize the opportunities that our experiences offer us. Okay, so for me, the idea of balance is very important in well-being. And then with this, I'd like to end my presentation. And if you have additional questions, please send me an email. Thank you very much.